Hi, Derek. Nice to have you back on Gelato on the pod. I haven't done one of these in a long time, and you were the first guest back in December 2023.
Nice.
Well over a year ago. We talked about ZeroDev account abstraction 437 back then. So yeah, how are you, man? And back then you already talked with me about what's cool about 437 and also what's hard about it. I think you mentioned multiple things about what's hard about it, but now over 1 year later, we have 7702 at the doorstep. I think Petra went live yesterday on Ethereum mainnet.
Petra went live on Ethereum Symposium.
Sorry,
right?
yeah.
Mainnet in April. Yeah.
Mainnet in April. It was on the test nets, and it caused a lot of breakages on the test nets.
Mm-hmm.
We're gearing up for 7702, and today we will discuss with you who else other than you would have the best insights here on how the account abstraction space is about to change, what it will mean for bundlers, paymasters, embedded wallets, dApp developers, users. We will dig deep into what are the benefits of 7702 and what is hype versus reality. Like, what problems still persist? What are the pain points that you're preparing for? Like who has to come together to make it all work? And ultimately, also answer the question is 437 adoption was there but not massive? Like, is 7702 gonna change that? And is account abstraction now gonna finally become much bigger than it was in the last 2 years? So yeah, let's jump in and talk. Let's start with first of all, how are you and how do you look on 437 now, and how much are you looking forward to 7702?
Yeah, thanks for the very long intro. I think it's funny that like we kind of like came full circle like in a year, right? Like the last time, the last time we were on this podcast, you were like we were chatting about EIP-7702, right? Like there was the hot new thing, the thing that's taking, I guess, like at least like the narrative, the Web3 narrative war by storm, right? And now we are back again talking about the new hot new thing in account abstraction, that is EIP-7702, right? So maybe we'll do this. Maybe we'll do this once a year, and then next year this time there will be another big new EIP, right? For account abstraction, right? We just keep cycling.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so. The question, okay, so a lot of questions, intro, but maybe we should just like start with talking about what is different, right? Just like to give the viewers some context about like what even is different, right? Like between EIP-7702 and EIP-437, right? Just so we are fully aligned. So EIP-437 is about new accounts, right? So if you as a user want to create a new wallet, right? You can create a smart contract wallet that is compatible with EIP-437, and then you can interact with the blockchain using that smart contract wallet the same way that you do with EOA wallets, right? But at the same time, obviously it brings a ton of new benefits, such as like the ability to send gasless transactions, to batch transactions, to automate transactions, / like skipping confirmations, like subscriptions and whatnot, and as well as like things like chain abstraction, right? Just like very seamless cross-chain transactions. So a lot of benefits, but the issue is that it's a new wallet, right? So if you are already using a wallet like MetaMask, you have to generate a new address for EIP-437 wallet, right? And I think like the biggest thing that builders in the AA space, such as myself, have learned over the course of building and pushing for EIP-437 products, it's just like it turns out that the friction of moving to a new wallet is really, really high, right? So like even though EIP-437 has definitely gained a huge amount of adoption and traction, in the grand scheme of things, the volume is still, compared to EOAs, is still very, very low, right? Like in the grand scheme of things. So so it just turns out that like even though there are a huge number of benefits with AA, if you ask someone to move their entire security setup to like a new setup, right? Like their C phrases and whatnot. If you ask them to move all their assets or their identity, right, to like a new wallet, it turns out to be like a really, really big friction, right? So and that's the problem that EIP-7702 solves, right? So EIP-7702, in short, is a way to upgrade, right? Or like turn a EOA into a smart account, right? But while keeping the same address, right? So that solves like the problem that I was just talking about, right? So then you get essentially all the benefits. I mean, not exactly all. Maybe we can talk about kind of like what's the difference, but you get kind of like 99 or like 95% of the benefits of AA. Of ERC-437, but you get the massive benefits, the massive benefits that your address remains the same, right? So that's like the reason why many people in the AA space, including myself, are super excited about the potential of EIP-7702 finally bringing account abstraction to all the Web3 users.
Yeah, the way I always this is exactly how I perceive the main benefit of 7702 is this will get very technical, but if you're a developer, Solidity developer, you will know the concept of message sender. And on the one hand, with 4337, the problem 4337 solved is it gave your EOA a smart contract twin, right? The user proxy. The issue with 437 is that proxy is a separate smart contract, separate from your EOA account with a different address. The cool thing is that account can now programmatically represent you when calling smart contract functions. So you can batch transactions, you can do an approve and swap on Uniswap and so on, right? And you can do gas sponsorship. You can have, you can interact on chain and have someone like a Gelato Pay Master One Balance or something sponsor the transactions for you, right? But the issue is, I think on the UI level, most UIs like OpenSea and so on, I remember the early demos of AA, they all need to support that specific account abstraction SDK to show the user the assets that they have in their smart contract twin, because all of them were written with EOAs in mind, with Web3.js, MetaMask, wallet providers in mind, where the injected user is their logged in, signed in EOA MetaMask wallet, right? So of course you had sort of solutions, Wallet Connect and this and that, but ultimately I feel like there was a huge friction, because the way I understood it with 437 is you have to go to all of these UIs and you have to make them care and adopt your registry so that they understand, okay, this EOA user has a ZeroDev or Biconomy or whatever account on these networks, and now I'm indexing the NFTs and ERC20s that are therein, and then I display them to the user, right? And that's a massive lift, because you have to go to all these UI app developers, sort of ask them to integrate your smart wallet contract, onboard the users to that, and change and update their production code, which is probably a heavy ask. And I think they're the huge, what I would hope is like, okay, 7702 is like, gets rid of that issue. The smart contract wallet has the same address as the EOA wallet, so all the indexing will work. Like any assets that are transferred in flight during the user operation execution on chain and end up back in your EOA wallet / smart contract wallet with 7702, they now immediately get indexed by all of this UI and indexing software. So you don't have to go around like convincing people, making people aware of different registries, especially in the multi-chain context. That's horrible, right? Like you have to, I think ZeroDev was smart. You guys had a system where your users would at least retain the same 437 user proxy address on all networks mapped to the EOA, but still it's like different networks, different smart contracts. It all gets messy. Is that is that the main benefit? Is there more? And then also, why is there all this talk about wallet standardization for 7702? Is that just about the batching being enabled through the wallet, or is that also about the indexing somehow?
Yeah, I think you touched on a few interesting points. I think I just want to start by maybe touching on a nuanced point, which I think people tend to get confused about, which is that EIP-7702 does not replace ERC-437, right? So they're actually complementary rather than competitive, So when I said earlier that like with ERC-437, like so far, right, people create like new accounts, right? That's not a inherent property of ERC-437. That is just a fact. That's just like a result of the fact that up until EIP-7702 comes out, there is simply no way for a EOA to be upgraded to a smart account, right? So in order to leverage, smart accounts, you have to generate new addresses, right? But ERC-437 at its core is a interoperability standards between the different components of a smart account system, which includes the smart accounts, the relayer, which we call the bundlers, right? As well as like the paymasters, which are basically like the guest manager, like the guest sponsorship manager, right? So ERC-437 is about specifying a standard interface between these components so that you can have you can use the relayer from one company with like the guest manager from another company with like the smart account from a third company, right? So it's an interoperability standards, so that's why it is complementary with EIP-7702, right? So EIP-7702 itself says nothing at all about like how the relaying is actually done, right? So again, this might get a little confusing, right? But keep in mind that like EIP-7702 is not native account abstraction, right? So those are two distinct concepts, right? So in a native account abstraction, you can have a smart contract wallet, and then it will just be able to send transactions into the Ethereum mempool. And then like the Ethereum nodes in the mempool will be able to pick up these transactions and include it in blocks. EIP-7702 does not give you that, right? So with EIP-7702, even after you upgrade your EOA to a smart account, when you send a smart account transaction, you still need a relayer to actually put the transaction on chain. And that's like where like the existing ERC-437 infrastructure, namely like the bundlers and the paymasters coming, right? So again, they are actually complementary, right? Like EIP-7702 takes care of turning your EOA into a ERC-437 compatible smart account. And then the ERC-437 infrastructure comes in and takes care of actually, including your transactions on chain, as well as like, taking care of like things like guest sponsorship and whatnot, right? Yeah, so
that's
I just wanted to
thanks. Yeah, that's a very good clarification. So first of all, probably a common misbelief. I wasn't even 100% sure on it because EIP-7702 often gets quoted in the same sentence as 3074, that like native account abstraction EIP that never made it, right? So okay, 7702 is not native account abstraction. It is essentially literally just enabling EOAs to have code, right? Like there's these new opcodes. I think it is, don't quote me on it, but like set code or something. So essentially now, I guess the difference is with 437, you have a separate entry point contract and factory with an entry point address, right? And now with 7702, the entry point is the EOA address, sort of, right?
Like if we want to be really technically precise about this, the ERC-437 entry point will still be used. So the entry point is actually just a global smart contract that coordinates the interactions between the smart accounts, the bundlers, and the paymasters. But I think what you are saying, which is true, is that the factory, right? So because like right now, like when you send a transaction with a ERC-437 account, if the account has not been deployed, the entry point will call the factory to deploy the account for you, right? To deploy the account for you. But when you use ERC-437 with EIP-7702, the factory is not involved at all, right? Because by definition, your address is like already there, right? Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So the entry point is still 437 interoperability, like the protocol, and it then calls into your EOA.
That's right.
Essentially,
Yes,
and from there. Okay, gotcha. And I didn't have that unlock, but it is so. This is very like you said, compatible with 437. We can reuse a bunch of the infrastructure. Like this is an enhancement for 437, like you said. Right? I actually get that now. Yeah, the cool thing is you can now from 437 forward the call into the user's EOA essentially, which now has code. And that's cool, and you can verify stuff in there and so on. So essentially, are you saying that your ZeroDev smart accounts that you've built for 437 are one-to-one reusable, and they will now just be set at EOA addresses?
So the smart accounts and okay. So I think let's talk about different components, right? So for the infrastructure, like the bundlers and the paymasters, I mean, including the ones that you guys built, right? All those will work almost exactly as is with 7702 accounts. One exception on the infrastructure layer is that bundlers, which are the relayers, I mean, they don't need to, but they should implement like a new API that's where like when they accept a user op, right, you know, like a smart contract transaction from the smart, from the smart contract wallet, the bundler should also accept the EIP-7702 authorization, you know, which is basically like the signature that's that the user signs to grant the upgrade, right? You know, to authorize the upgrade, right? You know, so basically like the flow here would be that like when a EOA wants to use a smart account feature, such as for example guest list transaction, you know, slash a sponsored transaction, right? The first time that the EOA sends that transaction, if you look at the blockchain, there's no code, like there's no bytecode like on the EOA yet, right? You know, because like that was the first time that they sent a transaction, right? So how it's gonna work is that like the EOA is gonna sign an authorization to say, okay, I would like the following code, the following bytecode to be inserted into my EOA, right? And then it will include that signature along with the user op, and they will send those two things, both the user op and the signature, to the bundler, right? You know, so for example, it could be the Gelato bundler, right? So they will send those two things to the Gelato bundler in one single API call, right? And then the Gelato bundler will, you know, when the Gelato bundler actually submits the user op onto the blockchain, it will also include that authorization, and that's how within that transaction atomically, the code will be inserted into the EOA, and then the user op will be processed through the new code that's inserted into the EOA, right? You know, so I just want to clarify that like there's one change that the Gelato bundler, you know, and really like any bundler that wants to be compatible with EIP-7702 should make, right? You know, so that's like the one change. On the SDK layer, pretty much nothing changed, right? You know, like ZeroDev remains the most powerful SDK to build with smart accounts, right? Like all the features you can do today with the ZeroDev SDK, you know, again, sponsorship, right? Transaction batching, permission / session keys, right? Chain abstraction, right? Everything will just work for EOAs, which is incredible, right? You know, so the SDK is pretty much the same. The smart account, okay, you know, so the smart account is a bit nuanced. So technically, our smart accounts, you know, which is kernel, you know, which is like the most popular, you know, as you know, like the modular smart accounts. Technically, it can be used unchanged for EIP-7702 EOAs as well. In practice, though, we have upgraded it, you know, because if you actually use it unchanged, there is a security vulnerability that can be exploited. You know, it probably would take too much time to dive super deep into this, you know, but essentially, it comes down to the fact that, you know, and it's actually something that we mentioned earlier in our call, which is, so remember how with ERC-437, the first time the smart account is deployed, the entry point calls the factory to deploy the contract, right? So the smart account is written in such a way that assumes that, you know, when the smart account is deployed, it's also going to be initialized with its initial configuration, such as like the fact that, oh, the smart account is going to be owned by the EOA wallets that's deploying the smart account, right? But with EIP-7702, since the factory is not actually going to be used, there is like potentially like a front-running attack where like for example, like a block builder, you know, can potentially insert a initialization transaction before the user's actual transaction to front run the initialization of the EIP-7702 account. You know, so we have like a whole write up and thread about this on our company Twitter. You know, which you can read about if you're interested. But the TLDR is just that like there's like a very small change that we had to make our modular smart account kernel actually fully safe to use with 7702. You know, and to our knowledge, we are the first smart accounts to do that. You know, so on day one of EIP-7702 going live, you will have a production ready, you know, perfectly secure smart accounts that you can use with your EOAs.
Cool, nice. All right, so let's wrap up the smart contract part. Essentially, the key takeaways are EOAs can now host code. They can now host the ZeroDev smart account or whichever 437 sort of compatible smart account system is out there. And now the 437 still remains probably like for the most part. You still have the bundlers, the paymasters. They still use the 437 protocol to interoperate if they want to. I'm sometimes a bit bearish on that because at Gelato we, as you know, we have this this in-house system, One Balance, which is like I think was the first multi-chain paymaster ever, even before 437, which is funny because you said you can reuse these paymasters and relayers bundlers for 7702, and actually ours even predated 437, and we sort of adjusted them slightly to work with 437. So it seems like a common pattern that like gas sponsorship infrastructure and bundler infrastructure can be reused and just has to be adapted slightly with these standards. But yeah, so 437 remains as an interoperability protocol to regulate the market between bundlers, paymasters, and users. It's actually a nice way that you put it there. Do you still expect, like I have my quarrels with 437, as you know, like I think the implementation has many flaws. Gas estimations are way too restrictive. There's internal revert problems. There's gas inefficiencies that at Gelato we've all circumvented with our first bundler paymaster combo, which is not fully 437 compliant, but it works in it. So do you think there will be such optimizations where for the first time you will also see like transaction batching and gas sponsorship being done outside of the 437 protocol with new code that is then hosted at the UA level? Like, are you interested in that? Like, are you building something there, or are you going to use 437 and you think is here to stay and good enough?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think you touched upon another common misconception in AA discourse, which is that ERC 437 does not have monopoly over account abstraction, right? ERC 437 is the first widely adopted standards for account abstraction, but it does not have a monopoly over it, right? So like even before ERC 437 comes out, Safe, right? Like the smart contract wallet has been running for a long time, right? So and you could say that there was account abstraction, right? Like Safe, they had their own relayers, that take care of submitting the Safe transactions on chain, right? Like, so those were the first bundles, right? The benefits of ERC 427, like you said, is kind of like regulating the market, right? Like in the sense that it allows you to plug and play, right? Like different smart accounts with like different relayers, which are bundlers with like different gas managers, like the paymasters. So the question as to like whether 437 will remain the, I guess, dominant account abstraction standards post EIP-7702, my personal prediction is yes. Just because there's simply too many companies and too many, honestly, like venture capital, right, that are backing these ERC 437 companies, and there's just like too much momentum, like if you're like a wallet developer building something with EIP-7702, right? You want your wallet to work forever, right? Like, so your choice is between building on top of a proprietary relayer, right? Or like account abstraction, just like a protocol, or building on top of ERC 437, right? Which is a widely recognized, standardized protocol with a huge amount of vendors that you can choose from, right? So if one relayer vendor goes out of business, you can fall back to another, right? So I think as a developer, that benefits of interoperability, right? Is just too great to overcome. Even though you can definitely argue that like there's like some inefficiency issues with ERC 437, right? But I think like the way that you guys went about doing this was very good, right? Which was that you gave the developers the efficiency gains, right? By combining like the bundles and paymasters, but you are still, I mean, I think you were underselling yourself when you said that you were not 427 compatible, right? Because in some sense it is, right? Like people can just replace the RPC with like the Gelato bundle RPC, and everything just works, right? So you are still 427 compatible, right? So I think that's my personal prediction of what's going to happen, which is that like there will be optimizations, but they will still try to conform to 437 to achieve that interoperability benefits, and that's what we're doing as well, right? Like we also did, as you know, right, like similar optimizations with our auto relay, right? So it's like a very similar thing in which we remain fully 437 compatible. It's like a drop-in replacement for any ERC 437 bundles and paymasters. but then from the developer's perspective, the gas just gets cheaper, right? So yeah, so that's my personal prediction of like how the optimizations will play out. So they will play out in a 437 in a 437 compatible way.
Yeah. And I meant like, of course we were compatible. I meant like not fully compliant. What I meant is, I think the 437 authors didn't have our bypass in mind that we designed at Gelato. Like when we joined the 437 space, when I first talked to you like 1.5 years ago, I was basically like, hey, I love Gelato one balance, I love Gelato relay. Actually, I don't agree with all of the implementation decisions taken by the 437 team. I think there's a lot of inefficiencies, and it turns out that by combining Gelato relay with Gelato one balance, we had like the most gas efficient way of doing user ops for a long time. Actually, Safe, I think, ran some benchmarks at some point, which showed that. But I think we were essentially working around the author's intentions a bit. But who cares, right? Like if developers are fine with it, and you're right, like it's still compatible, right? So I think at least like the code encoding and so on is compatible, so you still don't have that vendor lock-in, and I get it now. So essentially what you're saying with 437 is ultimately the feature of account abstraction, gas sponsorship, and batching, that is still gonna be encoded by the existing 437 SDKs like yours. Right. And UI developers, even with 7702, they still want to use that standard SDKs to enable batching and so on. Yeah, okay, gotcha. Now it makes actually I learned something there. So it makes sense. Great. Then I'm actually also less bullish on people building new bespoke batching implementations. I also think that they will keep using 437 probably.
I think maybe like one thought I want to insert here is that one great upside of EIP-7702 is that and again, like that's another common misconception, right? Is that with EIP-7702, the wallet actually remains a EOA still, right? So the wallet, so after 7702, when you upgrade the EOA into a smart account, the account is actually like a dual account, right? So it's both EOA and smart account at the same time, right? So that actually gives you a lot of like interesting properties and like things that you cannot do with ordinary ERC-437 accounts, right? So for example, like when we said before that that you're not unsure about like whether people will be building like custom EIP-7702 contracts, custom EIP-7702 batching mechanisms. Actually, I actually think that will happen, right? And here's why. So for example, with EIP-7702, you can do batching. You can do very cheap batching comparing to a regular non-ERC, non-7702 smart account, such as like a ERC-437 smart account today, right? Because the reason is because today, if you want to send a batch transaction, right, you have to go to the entry point, right? Like you have to, have like a bundler submit a transaction for you. You go to the entry point, blah, blah, blah. So there's like a lot of inefficiency involved there, right? But with EIP-7702, if all you want to do is batching and you don't care about things like gas sponsorship and like other features, you can just like, the EOA can literally just send a regular EOA transaction that calls into itself. And by that, I mean that since the EOA is now a smart account, right, there's like a contract code sitting at the address, right? So the EOA can send a regular EOA transaction that calls itself to execute the batch transaction, right? So now you're able to do batch transactions through a regular EOA transaction, independent of any smart account infrastructure, which is like way more efficient, as well as like way more interoperable, because you don't, in the sense that like if you are sending this on like a new blockchain, like the new blockchain doesn't need any account abstraction infrastructure deployed for the blockchain for this to work, right? Because it's just the EOA sending a regular EOA transaction and calling to itself. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose in the simplest sense, maybe one of the most common 7702 codes that will be used is just the common multi-call.
That's right, exactly, yeah.
Right, where you can now like do approve and transfer or approve and swap, and it's a generic multi-call. And here, like now we can go to the DEP UI layer, right? So on the DEP UI layer, like you might fairly similar to today with 437, you use ZeroDev SDK for 437 stuff. Difference being that maybe the bundler now has this authorization thing, and you can call into 7702, and your indexing layer works nicely because the user is logged in with their EUA, and you have that, you retrieve all of the assets and so on. They all sit in that address, right? So indexing is easier. But like on the UI, what do you think will change? Like for example, do you think UIs will have like a sort of like Uniswap, for example? Do you think they will adopt like this, like a proof and swap sort of specific 7702 code that they like? What needs to happen for that to even work on the Uniswap UI? What are the steps that they need to do to enable this type of batching with EUAs?
That's actually a really great question, and we actually have like a, like an article coming out soon about this exact issue, about this exact topic, which is essentially what does 7702 actually mean for the dev developers, right? If you are building a dev, what do you actually need to do to take advantage of this, right? So the short answer is that thanks to the efforts of like many wallet teams, many, I guess, account abstraction teams, there's like now a standardized way to do most of the most common things you want to do with smart accounts, right? Such as sponsor transactions, batch transactions, for example, right? And by that I mean that there's literally a RPC that has been defined. It's called the capability. As well as like the it's ERC-5792, ERC-5792, right? So that ERC defines a standard RPC for sending batch transactions. So for example, if you Uniswap and you want to bundle the approve and the swap, right? So you will call the RPC through towards like the connected wallet, right? So you will say wallets underscore send calls, like that's like the name of like the RPC, right? And then you will pass like the core data of both transactions, right? So it's kind of like a regular transaction API, except that it takes like a batch of transactions, right? So yeah, and then like as long as the connected wallets is a smart account that supports transaction batching, whether it's like a regular non-7702 account, whether it's like a non-7702 smart accounts, such as like the ERC-427 accounts today, or whether it's like a 7702 accounts, right? Such as, so for example, like MetaMask, right? Like has publicly committed to supporting 7702, right? So like after 7702, MetaMask will support that RPC call as well, right? So as long as like the connected wallet supports the RPC call, the dev can call the RPC to do smart account things such as batched transactions.
All right, cool. So from the onboarding flow, the code needs to be initialized at the EUA. I suppose the dev then also has to take care of onboarding somehow if the user doesn't have such a code yet, or do you think it will be batched like on this RPC?
I see. I see what you mean. So so I think if I understand your question correctly, like you're asking about like who takes care of like actually upgrading the EUA, right? Like who,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So the short answer is that it will be taken care of by the wallet. It's not the responsibility of the dev to insert code into the user wallet, because that would be very insecure, right? So it's the responsibility of the wallet, right? So the assumptions that like, so for example, for MetaMask, of course, like no one knows exactly what's going to look like, but I imagine that MetaMask will have a I guess like a flag in the MetaMask UI that's like, enable smart accounts or whatever, right? So when you check the box, they will send that, they will send some, well, I mean, like when you, okay, so if we're very technical about it, when you check the box, they will likely, first generate the signature that authorize the upgrade, right? And then the next time you send a transaction, they will include that authorization so that the next time you send a transaction, the next time you send any transaction, your UA will be turned into a smart accounts atomically, right? Yeah. So and then for embedded wallets, right? Such as like our partners, like like Privy, Dynamic, Turnkey, those embedded wallets will again like have settings, because with embedded wallets, like you configure them, like the dev developers configure them through the SDK, right? So when you use like a embedded wallet SDK, you will have like some flag again in the SDK that says use 7702, right? And if you do that, then the wallet SDK will take care of, again, like I said, like the next time you send a transaction, they will bundle that authorization to insert the code into your UA, right? Yeah. So the short answer is that it will be taken care of by the developer, by the wallet developer. By the wallets. And then as the dApp developer, all you have to do is just two things. One, use a RPC to check if the connected wallet is even a smart wallet, right? So like there's like another standard RPC where you can literally check whether the connected wallet supports things like batching. And then secondly, if it does, then you will have like a branch in your code that says, okay, if this is a smart wallet that supports batching, then I can use this batching RPC to send transactions instead of like the regular RPC, so that I can achieve batching.
Cool, nice. So essentially, there's a lot of standardization happening at the Web3 wallet layer, like the MetaMask and so on. They are coalescing around probably, like, first of all, new RPCs, like Web3 JSON RPC methods, like to support 7702 things, and then probably 2 or 3 code implementations like batching and that might be exposed on these RPCs, so that if a wallet like MetaMask already has users that upgrade to code, you can find that code, you can discover it like in the app whether the user that is logged in has that, and then the app can encode for these new batching methods and so on. But I think gas sponsorship, like you mentioned this okay, like you can send a transaction from UA into your EUA to trigger a smart contract batching function that still requires the user to sign the raw signed transaction and have money on their EUA, right? Like, so sponsorship is not solved. For this, you always need to have.
So for sponsorship, it has actually also been standardized over IPC. So just like how there is like a send course, like RPC for batching. There's another RPC. It's actually technically the same RPC. It's actually technically the same RPC in that, like, when you use the send course RPC to send a transaction, you can also include a paymaster URL. So basically from the dev's perspective, if I want to sponsor gas for my users, 2 steps. Step 1, sign up for a paymaster provider, such as, for example, ZeroDev, right? Get the paymaster URL, right? And then when you send transactions in your dApp code, include that URL into the RPC code. So there's literally a field within the RPC code that's like paymaster URL, right? So you include that, and then the wallet will receive the URL. And then when the wallet, because in a typical flow, the dApp is just formatting the transaction and give it to the wallet. The wallet is the thing that actually sends the transaction, right? So the wallet, when it receives the paymaster URL, will send the transaction in such a way that uses the paymaster. So everything has been standardized. To really clarify here, the 2 things that have been standardized, and which are also the 2 most commonly used features with smart accounts, is guest sponsorship and transaction batching. So for those, standardized RPCs exist, right? So dApps can do those things in a way that's agnostic to the specific implementation of the wallet. However, like we don't have too much time to dive into this right now, but another topic that I wanted to talk about, and I will write an article about, is for many other smart account features, such as like session keys and permissions, right? Such as like chain abstraction, right? Like cross-chain transactions. Those are much harder to standardize because there are so many different ways to there are so many different potential interfaces for those things that, like, we haven't achieved very strong standardization around those things yet, which means that it will in fact be challenging for dApp to, for example, if I want to use session keys, if I want to automate transactions, for the dApp to do that in a way that's agnostic to how the wallet actually works is very difficult. It's going to be very difficult. So we will have some fragmentations following 7702. But the good news is that for the most popular features, sponsorship and batching, the dApps, they don't need to care about how exactly the wallet works. Like those have to be, those have been standardized. Those have been standardized.
Okay, so there has been a push for standardization around 7702 that didn't really subside and or like precipitate and 437. So 7702 also comes with a more like standards group, more buy-in from wallets, and this should also make it easier for everyone. is essentially okay. Cool. All right. Do you still have time for some more questions? I know we are at time.
Maybe let's do one more. Yeah, let's just do one more. Yeah.
All right. So okay, one more question. I need to first two-part question. I'm cheating. Two-part question. So you already mentioned embedded wallets, but like I think you mentioned to me at some point that embedded wallets are to stand massively like they benefit almost the most from 7702, which sort of makes sense because they are custodying EUAs. But maybe you can just quickly comment on that again. Like how do you expect them to change, if at all, or are they just more powerful? And then like the real last question is, what like is it all roses and sunshine now with 7702? Like is your life probably a lot easier, or and what are you still? You already mentioned session keys, chain abstraction, and so on. What of the old 437 pain do you still have afterwards, and where do you still see friction, or is literally everything solved now?
Okay, so regarding your first question, I mean the reason why I setting up previous article, that I think embedded wallets will embrace EIP-7702 first is because it just has like less baggage comparing to traditional wallets, right? Because like if you're on MetaMask, you have like so many users, right? Like you have like millions of users already using MetaMask. To push a feature like inserting code into a EOA has a huge amount of security implications, right? So wallets, they will tend to be very cautious because they have to guard against existing assets, right? But embedded wallets don't have that baggage, right? Like embedded wallets, they by definition, they are spinning up new wallets all the time, right? So they have they can move way faster and give, and also like since embedded wallets is like a developer product, the developers who don't want to use 7702, they don't have to, right? Like the basically like developers can decide on like a per project and like per app basis whether they want to leverage 7702, which also makes like the friction of adopting 7702 way lower, right? Yeah. So and then regarding the second question, which was whether there would be any issues that I foresee regarding 7702. So first of all, like 7702 is definitely incredibly bullish, right? Like because like I said, it solves the number one single biggest issue with the adoption of account abstraction, which is the fact that like now, like after 7702, you no longer have to move your assets to a new address, right? You just get the benefits of AA at your same wallet, right? And like your same address, and even potentially your same wallets, like after companies like MetaMask, like Rainbow, Coinbase, like after they implement 7702, right? So it's incredibly bullish. Now, what could be some issues that comes up? I think I already mentioned a few ones. So one is interoperability, right? Like again, even though we have standardized like some of like the most common features, such as again sponsorship, as well as batching, there are still a lot of like really powerful and important features that have not been standardized, such as like session keys, permissions, chain abstraction, right? Like those are much harder to standardize. So we could see a world in which if the dev wants to leverage things like session keys, they will have to implement different code branches, like different implementations for different wallets, which is like really painful for the dev, right? Another thing is like the things like there can only, and another thing is like the interoperability between different smart wallets, right? So like since there can only be obviously like one code sitting at your address at the time, right? So what if, because like right now, I mean a lot of people, including myself, we use the same private key with different wallets, right? Like my private key is sitting in MetaMask, in Uniswap wallet, in Coinbase wallet, right? It's the same address, right? But what if they all use 7702, right? What if they all want to insert code into my account, right? Like how does that even work, right? So they will have to keep overriding each other, which is not an issue in itself, but it could cause a lot of like if it's not implemented carefully, it can cause some really subtle security issues. Whereas like, for example, maybe when the Coinbase wallet runs, it assumes that the code sitting at my address is the code that it inserted earlier, but in fact, MetaMask has overwritten it since then, right? So if Coinbase is not careful, there could be some really subtle security issues here, right? Yeah. So and then maybe the last thing I'll mention is just that like the reason why 7702 is not the end game is because like I said earlier, 7702 is not native account abstraction, right? for a 7702 account to leverage the account abstraction benefits, we still need to rely on infrastructures like bundlers, paymasters, which, you know, I mean, they work pretty well, but like they are still just like extra things that you have to worry about, right? So native account abstraction, right, in the sense that like Ethereum mempool actually being able to just take transactions from smart contract wallets, that still needs to be something that happens. And also because with the 7702 accounts, the EOA key, right? Since again, like I said, the 7702 account is both a EOA and a smart account at the same time. The EOA key will forever has pseudo access to the wallet, right? Which means that you still have to safeguard your seed phrases all the time, right? So that's still like a really, really big pain point that 7702 does not address, which is also another reason why, you know, native account abstraction and like the embrace of full smart contract wallets that are not EOAs should still be the end game that we strive for.
Gotcha. So to finish off here, actually, this was one of the points I had in the earliest presentation we had internally about 7702. I was like, wait a second. So, like, of course, multisig is a potential application, or you can turn your EOA into a safe multisig or something. Like, not really, right? Because you always have that private key, that seed phrase that can always reset the code, right? So that pseudo access, even if you have a nice little multisig setup in your 7702 EOA, like that pseudo access, if that is gone, and like if you compromise, that attacker can just deploy a different code there, right? So actually that's an interesting point. So you don't have true multi-signature unless you somehow use an MPC key or something, right? For that EOA.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you could have multi-sig, but like the original key, yeah, we still have pseudo access, right? You know, which is kind of weird, right? You know,
yeah. Cool. All right. Thanks so much for your time. I could go on, but I'm gonna let you know. Let you go. I learned a lot today, and super excited about to always build together with you guys. To have ZeroDev with Gelato, Bundlers, Paymasters go live on all the Gelato rollup chains. Yeah, let's make it happen. Thanks a lot, Derek.
Yeah, we should look forward. You know, like EIP for 7702 is gonna go live in April, right? You know, and all the Gelato rollups should have day one support for EIP-7702, right? You know, so definitely like super excited to roll out 7702 to all the Gelato rollup customers, right? You know, and help, you know, all the users on these rollups enjoy the benefit of account abstraction from day one. Yeah.
Cool. We already got you covered. We already got a 7702 testnet running for 2 months. So yeah, let's work on it soon.
Amazing.
All right. Cool. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks everyone.
All right. Bye.